Welcome to the Fat Fueled Family podcast, where every week Danny and Maura Vega discuss topics that help families live a healthy and active lifestyle with their little ones, including nutrition and training, peaceful parenting, education, and mindset. To stay up to date, make sure to hit subscribe on this podcast and check out the blog at www.fatfueled.family. You can also find them on Facebook and Instagram at dannyvega.ms, at fatfueledmom, and at fatfueledkids, and Fat Fueled Family on YouTube. Enjoy the show.
What's that?
Oh, this?
Yeah.
It's just my keto brick.
Keto brick? What's a keto brick?
Well, keto brick, it's an actual brick, which is awesome because it lasts me a really long time. Can't say the same for you.
Nope.
But keto brick is an awesome keto-friendly snack that it could be used so many ways, you guys, seriously. But it is keto-friendly, high-fat, low-carb, has really, really good macros. It's shelf-stable, which I love because I like to take it with me when I leave the house with the kids. And it's got no sweeteners, none of the crap that we're usually staying away from. So no allulose, erythritol, corn fiber, soy, any of that stuff that we're usually avoiding. But it makes such a great snack. I also love it just as a treat. I like to put it in my coffee and the kids love it. So that's a plus.
I totally agree. And I have one of these every single day.
An entire brick.
Yeah, everybody knows I like to crush mine up into cereal and have it like a cereal. My current favorite flavors are peanut butter and chocolate peanut butter cup, which we have right here next to us. What about you?
I really love the peanut butter because it's nice and smooth, but my other favorite flavor would probably be toasted coconut.
Yeah, toasted almond coconut
really
is amazing. And yeah, of course, as you all know, we are great friends with the owners of this company, Robert Sykes and Crystal Sykes. And both of them, when this started, they were just wrapping these things up in aluminum foil and shipping them out themselves, pulling all-nighters. And here we are several years later. It's an amazing company, guys. They have vegan options, vegan-friendly options, as well as whey options. So the two flavors that I mentioned are chocolate peanut butter cup and peanut butter. And the chocolate peanut butter cup is whey, and the peanut butter is with the pea protein. So if you don't tolerate whey, no worries. Or if you're on a vegan diet, no worries. You can have the peanut butter. So guys, click on the link in the description of this podcast episode and check out the Keto Bricks ASAP. It gets the Fat Fuel family seal of approval. Anything else?
No, that's it. It makes a really great snack. A little trick, I will just give one last tip, is if you want to melt it down, I like to melt it down and put it in little molds to make it just bite sizes for the kids because it's a brick.
It is a brick. Get your Keto Bricks.
Do it.
Welcome to the Fat Fuel Family Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Vega, and I am joined here today by Alberto Casillas, the one and only. What's up, brother?
How's it going, man?
Man, it's good. We've been trying to do this. I was looking through our texts, and we scheduled it for August, and here we are towards the end of September, man. But we finally got together, dude. Thank you for your flexibility.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on. And life tends to get in the way sometimes, so you just got to make do.
Yeah, man. Dude, I'm so happy to have you on, bro, because I've just been watching from the sidelines, man, and just seeing, your constant progress, man. And it's one of those things that I think nowadays with the Instagram era and, where people just are always focused on the now, and they really don't take the time. So we're definitely going to get into that. But, we always start with the question, what is the most critical problem you're currently trying to solve?
Well, I got an extremely first world response, and I got an extremely political response. So I don't know which way you want to go, or if you want to cover them both.
Bro, let's do both. I like both of those ideas.
Right. Well, we'll go with the political one first, so we end on a slightly lighter note. But wondering how we're going to move forward with all the friends I've been losing in this crazy time that we're living in now between vaccinated and unvaccinated, and what's real science and what's not real science. And I still got to go out and do my job every day. I train automotive painters as my full-time gig. So, my job is where the body shops are, which according to certain people who are quote-unquote friends, makes me a dangerous person because I don't have the luxury of doing my job behind a keyboard and just doing it from home. So I still got to travel to Louisiana, travel all over Texas, a little bit of Colorado, and it puts interesting social pressure. And I hate to use the word discrimination, but it's so fitting.
It is though. It is. It is. It is. It's just a different type.
Yeah, it's so strange, but my wife's on the same page as I am, and we're both headstrong in that sense, so it's not that big of a deal. For me, it's mostly my kids can't hang out with their kids because I still go to work and because I still go to a gym, and gyms are apparently dangerous in certain people's minds. So that gets a little tricky, and navigating that, and trying to keep the frustration between mom and dad, and keep the kids as cool and calm as possible, and trying to raise them as normal as possible in these crazy times. But yeah, that's the deep answer.
Well, hold up, because before you go to the other one, I really. So you're telling me that there are people in the automotive painting business, that I would assume, I look at someone like that and I say, man, that's someone who, as it is, went against the system, went against the programming that told them that they had to do a certain career route, which I didn't even have the presence of mind to have. My kids, I won't let them do it. My kids to go to college, they better have like a 5-10 year plan with a business plan and all that. And even then I might say, no, that's stupid. So you look at someone like that, especially if it's a dude, and the person, you automatically assume, man, this guy's, I hate to say it, but this guy's a man. This guy, he gets his hands dirty. He's working with chemicals. He understands that he's got to, keep himself safe from inhaling certain things and all that. And he's in a lot of the time in a body shop, like these are the type of people that you're having issues with them.
There, it's about 50-50. The more dramatic issues are with like just regular friends. They have IT backgrounds and stuff like that. So they're and I always say that. Let me caveat this very carefully, because if you had the luxury to work from home when this whole thing began last year, and all you had was your computer in front of you at work and the news playing in the background, I will not fault you for the way you feel, because that's what you were being fed constantly. But for them not to like open their eyes and take into account that there's this whole other part of society that went to work every day, that through the thick and the thin, that like, and I always say this too, like the guy who owns my company was on the point and he was on the ball, and his message from day one was, no one knows what's going to happen. Mind you, this was then. Things are going to get really weird. Take care of yourself, take care of your health, take care of your family. And I will promise you one thing, if the person next to you gets sick, you cover for him. If you get sick, they'll cover for you, and you will have a job and a paycheck 100% guaranteed. And like in my head, it's always like, imagine if that was the message from the top down with the government saying, just take care of yourself. We're going to take care of you, but keep plugging along and do the best you can. But clearly it didn't go that way, and stuff got obviously very, very strange. But yeah, I mean, even with the shops, it's 50-50. Like we as an industry are not exactly the healthiest of people. A lot of self-medication, a lot of still like drinking on the weekends, and it's with the blue collar, it gets kind of weird. And I've talked to other people about this, where it's almost like a badge of honor. Can you drink a 6-pack or a 12-pack and then just be at work at 6 o'clock the next morning to start grinding?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And it's changing, because all the older generation starting to retire out, and there's a younger generation coming up. But we are definitely a very self-destructive industry as a whole. Fast food, sugar, and how all that stuff goes. And so it's like, when I'm out there, and it's at the same time with my job, it's like I can't really harp on these people, because like you really can't turn your customers into your enemies.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I do tend to lead by example, and they do ask a lot of questions, and about the eating and the training and everything else. So it comes up, but I just wait for it to come up organically, and kind of approach it very cautiously from there, because it gets too easy to get super dogmatic and be like, bro, that Red Bull ain't doing you any favors.
Yeah, and if they're not ready for the message, man, they're just gonna be like, who the hell does this guy think he is? Leave me alone.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, okay. Now tell me, you said there was the political one, and there was a what?
A very first world one.
A first world one. Okay.
Yeah, and you're kind of familiar with it, because as of last November, I got into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I've been getting better at that. And it should come to no one's surprise that weightlifting and powerlifting as heavy as possible, and then getting your joints bent in directions they're not designed to go, really, really don't go hand in hand.
Yeah,
so it's like I've been struggling for a while with like all my PRs are going down, but I'm getting better at jiu-jitsu, and you can't have both, because I'm always sore somewhere from grappling, and just trying to find that balance. And along with that, I signed up for my very first tournament, which mildly terrifies me. And,
Love it.
but it's like, I'm currently weighing in as somewhere between 168 and 170 pounds, and the cutoff for my weight class is 166 and a half pounds, or I got to go up one. But I'm performing really, really well, and I'm pretty lean, so I can only manipulate water weight, and I'm not sure if that's an avenue I want to try to go down if I'm, expected to perform. And, with grappling, it's a lot of full intensity stuff. So
Yeah, 'cause
I
it's
signed
a
up for the
2-hour
higher weight
weigh-in,
class. Yeah,
It's a 2-hour weigh-in,
So
right? Yeah, you can't do
yeah,
much
so
without
it's
water.
no, so I just signed up for the higher weight class, and if I just so happen to weigh in at the lower weight class and they move me, great. If not, I don't really, in the wrestling world, I don't really think giving up 10 pounds is going to be all that detrimental.
Yeah, man, and
At least not. I mean, I'm a white belt, so like not at my level, that's for sure.
yeah, and dude, like what you said is so true, man. Like that deep, weird, I don't want to call it pain. It's like that dull pain in the elbow, in the shoulder sometimes, in the neck. It just like, it definitely, you can't do as much volume. And like the more people that I speak to, like I got this one guy at my gym who's just a beast, bro. And he hasn't lifted in years, but he's still jacked, like I guess once you build a certain amount of muscle, he just keeps it with the calisthenics and things like that. But I hear you, man. I totally hear you. So, all right, cool. So I really want you to talk to people because you've had some adversity to go through. So I want you to kind of tell people your superhero origin story.
Yeah, superhero origin story. It's a good one, and I talked about this on many podcasts. So there's some deep dives. We'll keep it, keep the pretty overview pretty vague this time. But most of my adult life, I suffered from ulcerative colitis, and I've talked to my doctor about this, and he entertains me, but how certain doctors are certain ways. But I honestly think that like my years of growing up with your standard American diet, and then throw me into the body shop world where you're dealing with extremely toxic chemicals and extremely toxic environments. And then, back in the late 90s, there wasn't so much of a emphasis on safety. So, you just put a little mask on, but your eyes are exposed and that kind of thing. And, when you first, get into this stuff, and it was almost cool to come home covered in paint because it showed you did something. So I talked to my doctor about this, and I honestly think that's where what kicked off my autoimmune disease was just bad dieting, and then throw me into that toxic environment. It was just a lot. It was probably too much for me to handle. And I lived in 4 states. I always say I had the misfortune of living in 4 states. I live in Texas now, so I've had many doctors in all of those states. Never once did anyone ever say anything about diet. It was just a matter of take these medications. We're going to throw this dart at the dartboard, kind of see what sticks.
Turn off your immune system.
Yeah. See what sticks, and we're just going to kind of go from there. And it was always the like, almost like the hand clap, like, yeah, you're doing good. Yeah, you're gaining a little bit of weight, and you're always tired, and your back always hurts, your knees always hurt, but you're getting older. You're in your mid-30s. This is the kind of thing that's going to happen. And the amount of times I heard that was absolutely insane. And I mean, and in my worst, it got bad. Like I don't remember how, I guess, light, because lean isn't definitely not the right word, how much weight I lost and how light I ended up being when I was at my worst. But it was probably somewhere in the 150s, 160s. My skin had a really green hue, so there was some serious malnutrition stuff going on. And part of it was my fault, because in my early to mid-20s, when you find out something in your body isn't working as it's supposed to, like at that age, it's really hard to accept. And instead of kind of going full on in on the health side like I do now, I went completely the other route, where I went full on in on the I want to be 20 side, 21. And so, all my friends are going out and clubbing and drinking, and I knew it wasn't great for me, but I was going to do it anyways and deal with it tomorrow. And I did that for a really, really long time. Lost a ton of weight, had this really weird, like, skeletal look to my face, green hue to my skin. And I kept that up for a long time. And I just, hey, I'm not that sick, because, I'm still working 40 hours a week. At the time I was in Taekwondo, like, hey, well, if I work 40 hours a week plus, and I still make the Taekwondo, then I'm still going home and then lifting, and how sick could I possibly be? But it was that in that case was 100% stubbornness and just me pushing through, because that was 100% not sustainable. And I mean, like, burning the candles at both ends is an understatement for how I was approaching it back then. Yeah, it was bad. I mean, the symptoms are bad. You could look them up. joint pain, malnutrition, bloody stools. And when I mean bloody, I mean like it would send an average person immediately to the hospital when you get up from going to the bathroom. You turn around and you see what's there.
Yeah,
but
bro, yeah.
but it's like, in my mindset at the time, it was like the million paper cuts thing, where it's like if you just accept a little bit every day, then one day you turn around, you're like, oh man, this is bad, but I didn't really take into consideration how bad it is. It was just a little bit every day, a little bit worse every day, a little bit worse every day. Then you find yourself in a spot where you're like, oh, this is not good. So like I rode that out through my 20s. In my 30s, kind of started cleaning everything up with the help of my wife. We wanted to eventually start having a family, and so we decided we're just gonna try to be more adult, and cleaned up my diet quite a bit, which is actually funny because she ended up going vegetarian for like 14 years. But what that did for me was eliminate the vast majority of the garbage we were eating. No more fast food, none of that stuff. So it was an improvement, and it helped. And I didn't go vegetarian. I would just cook her meals and throw like a protein on the side. And so pretty much once the partying phase passed, and I kind of started taking my health seriously, the medication actually had time to start working. And I felt tremendously better, but I couldn't stop gaining weight. Like it was one of those, like your average story of 5 pounds a month. Every time you go to the doctor, well, I'm 5 pounds heavier. Oh, it's okay. You're getting older. It's just what happens. And and it got to the point where it was like, when I was still spraying cars, that like I thought, as most people do, unfortunately, that like waking up and popping a couple Advil just to get through the day is just how you do things. Just to push the joint pain away. And it wasn't until I got lucky enough to get completely away from painting, step onto the service side, which is training painters, what I do now. And then with this job, I stumbled onto keto. And then the combination of those two, and all my symptoms completely went away. And kind of going back to where I think that's what brought on my symptoms. It was a complete diet and lifestyle change, and completely backing away from the industry, where my health did a complete 180. And then from that point, it was almost like I was so used to pain and suffering that I had no control over, that once I started feeling a lot better, and was able to perform better and lift heavier and all the physical stuff, that like I really got a kick out of putting myself in uncomfortable situations that I have 100% control over. Because like you'll go to do a deadlift PR and you're staring at all this weight and you're like, man, this is gonna hurt, but I'm here, I'm doing this to myself, I know it's gonna hurt, and I know when the pain's gonna stop. And having that like mentality versus the other side where you're just constantly suffering every day, it made a huge difference.
You had to give yourself the bandwidth. You had, you didn't have the bandwidth before. Like there's no way you could have done that because your stress bucket was just overflowing.
Oh, absolutely. I was a metabolic wreck, and like, don't let me underplay it. I don't think I did, but it was ugly and it was bad, and I never told anyone. Which again, part of me being stubborn. Another podcast I was on, my mom had recently listened to, and she actually called me and she was like, I never knew you were that sick. And the only response I had was like, well, I never told you. Yeah. So how would you know? And it was just one of those things. So I was like, you don't know how bad someone's suffering, because people can get really, really good at hiding it. And it's been a trip, because now I had a 3-year, this is another funny story. I had a 3-year stretch where I was on no medications at all. Carnivore pretty much took care of that. And went to the doctor, had labs, everything's perfect. Doctor couldn't find anything wrong with me. The only advice my doctor gave me was, would you please eat a vegetable or a fruit as a favor to me, not as a medical recommendation, but just so that I could feel better. And I was like, all right, I'll give you an avocado or something. So, I went on that health kick. Dentist had been bugging me about getting a wisdom tooth pulled for like over a year. And I'm like, nah, it's not bothering me. But at that point, the only thing anyone could find wrong with me was I had a wisdom tooth impacted. So I was like, you know what? Let's get this taken care of. Well, the combination of painkillers and antibiotics did not go well with my gut, and actually spun me into a flare. And so, I mean, now it's been taken care of. I found a new doctor. We had a colonoscopy. He got me on a very low dose medication, and everything's back to normal. But it's kind of funny to think that like the worst health decision I made as an adult was the decision to have a wisdom tooth pulled, because that's the only thing the doctors could find wrong with me.
Dude, I love that though, man. I think, dude, there's so much that you said that I was just like, wow. So first of all, you're a freaking PPE expert.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah, like anybody needs to know about PPE, talk to Berto, man. Like he'll give you the real deal. And I just watched one what's his name? The guy with the happy trees, the painter.
Oh yeah. Oh, I just watched that too.
You good,
The
right?
the Bob Ross one, yeah.
Yeah, you saw how, did you see the thing that he used to do with the paintbrush? How he used to like wipe it off and all those fumes would get in him, and then he had the cancer.
Yeah. The odorless thinner.
Yeah, so like everybody who's, doing anything like that, man, don't take this stuff lightly. You got to protect your eyes. You got to protect your mucous membranes, anything that's coming into contact with stuff. I'll tell you this, bro, my only story that I have with that is like I was in 7th grade and my dad, he used to clean pools. So I had muriatic acid and chlorine, in my backyard on the side of the house, and I learned about acids and bases. And so, I get a little what do you call it? A little saucer, and I take it to the outside, and here I am. I'm being careful, and I cover my nose, and I pour the acid and the chlorine, and I start to see the little reaction. I'm like, oh wow, and then I breathed it in through my mouth like a retard. Like I was just so stupid, like I'm just like, what's wrong with me? I breathed it in. And I started to get dry heaves, man. And that's when that was the only time that I was like, man, I really need to protect myself when I do this stuff. So, thank you for sharing that, man. There's a lot there. I remember, just seeing the first couple of pictures, bro, your waist has shrunk so much. It's been, amazing to see like your physique, how it's grown. And, so on that subject of physiques, where do you think men get it wrong when it comes to building like a long-term plan to build a better physique?
Easy answer is impatience. And don't get me wrong, everyone suffers from it, and on top of that, a little bit of body dysmorphia. Like everybody suffers from it to some degree. Like I just got done with the carnivore cut. Now I'm as lean as I've ever been. I'm reversing out now. Weight's still stable. Eating more calories. I'm as lean as I've ever been. Got veins coming up from my abs, but every time I look in the mirror, I just grab that little flap of skin above my waist, and I'm like, yeah, it's still there. That hasn't gone away yet. But if you understand, that it's unhealthy and you have a pretty good grasp of what you're going through, that's one thing. But to go from zero and expect to be ripped, in 30 days is just not going to happen. And then the crash diet side of things, which is ever popular. A lot of people get that wrong, and just like you were saying, the cycle. Being able to, as healthy as possible and as slowly as possible, drop the weight, drop the body fat, get that down, and then, don't hang out down there to see how low you'll get. Have yourself a goal and start building back up, and then, have the cycle go up and down. And as we're about to talk about, like year after year, you got to be very patient because we are talking year after year here, but the results speak for themselves and they just keep getting better and better. Like I'm 42 now, and this is the leanest and strongest I've ever been. And way better than it went for me last year. And I wasn't halfway through this current cut, and I was already planning next year's goals because it's like it's got to be that slow. You've got to take your time and you've got to let everything stick and play the long game, which I completely understand. Like when I was 200 pounds, I'm 5'8". The heaviest I got was right under 200 pounds, and I wore it well, but it was definitely not comfortable. And I just wanted to be shredded, and I found keto, and I'm like, I got to drop 5 or 10 pounds and I'll be ripped. I'll be like 8-10% body fat. So, you start the diet, next thing I know, I'm down, I think it was 35 pounds, and I'm like, what happened to all my muscle? Well, it turns out it wasn't muscle. But, that's a realization that everyone's got to go through. It's a realization that everyone's got to go through and accept it and just pump the brakes, take steps, and take your time.
Yeah, bro. Here's the thing. I don't see you all the time in person, but like I see your pictures, and like I remember thinking in 2018, man, that was great. He did awesome. And then came 2019, and then it was like, now looking back at 2018 from 2021 is just insane, dude. Like cuz back then that looked awesome. And that's where people lose that perspective, bro. So obviously, like you mentioned, we're going to talk about the way you've been chipping away yearly, following that long game approach to building muscle, cutting, ramping back up in that cyclic fashion for several years. I want to talk about, when you talk about this, make sure to mention, what has been happening to your caloric baseline, and then also the adjustments that you've made as you've gotten leaner. And there's another thing that I think is hilarious because for anybody who doesn't know, Berto like comes to me and is like, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, and this. And like, he's done that with me like several times. I've just been the one who's been like, yeah, Berto, that's a good idea. And so, you know, he's had that intuition. He's had the knowledge that he's built. And, you know, I've just been there to confirm that. Sometimes we need another set of eyes to look at something to confirm that. So, you know, what advice would you give to someone who's recently committed to making this type of lifestyle change? And how have you changed that approach as the years have gone on?
First, research. Ask. I mean, most of the people in our little sphere are very, very open, and you know, if they have the time, they will gladly answer your questions. And especially if you present them with an idea that's absolutely terrible, they will definitely take the time to correct you. But do your research, 100%. And then, you know, find, what I always tell people is like, you know, there's a bunch of different ways to cut out there. There's a bunch of different protocols. There's a bunch of different coaches. Find the one that resonates with you the most, because you're more than likely going to stick to that one. You know, like I'm personally a high fat guy. I've always been a high fat guy. And I'm not saying the low fat side of things doesn't work, but it doesn't resonate with me, so that it would be against my best interest to follow that, to follow that path. You know, I've had great success sticking with the high fat thing. And I really can't complain that way. And plus, it's, you know, kind of goes against what everybody does. So that's always kind of cool, too, to rip that in people's faces.
I feel you, dude. I feel you there. I love that. Yeah. So just like talk about the whole, like, how it's changed throughout the years, like where your calories have started to, because I would assume, like, I remember we've talked about this a few times, the way your caloric baseline has gone up, and then just the adjustments that you've made, because, you know, for me, as someone who made a program that was trying to capture as many populations as possible, it ends up not being as optimal, you know, because then I'm just happy that people like you, people like Michelle, people, you know, several people in our space that really want to continue doing something like this, but as they get leaner, as they get more muscle, as their body changes, they realize that, for example, there's a reason why there's a 25% over and a 25% under, you know, body fat, you know, calculator and things like that, because, you know, you can get a little bit more aggressive with people with more body fat, but someone like you and someone like me, I don't do the big, you know, big popular version of the Carnivore Keto Cut. You know, I've done my own. I've had to increase my calories, my caloric multiplier. I've had to, you know, incorporate refeeds and things like that. So that's why I wanted to kind of talk to you about that, because people need to understand that what worked last year is probably not going to work this year. And it's going to continue to change like that. And you have to continue to put in the research and the work.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, first things first, you've got to establish a baseline. And establishing a baseline is tracking. You like, do I personally like tracking? No, I really don't. But if I ever stop, I'll never start again. So I still track everything meticulously. But as a saying goes, you can't manage what you don't measure. So you've got to at least establish a baseline, because even at, like, if they were to buy your program, they're like, okay, well, I'm looking at these macros, now what? Well, if you didn't establish a baseline, you don't know whether you're eating more or eating less, or, you know, which way or sideways. So you've got to establish a baseline, take your time. I always tell people, try to find your true maintenance, which is incredibly, incredibly time consuming and difficult. You know, if you're still losing weight, then you got to slowly start bumping them back up to where you plateau. And as soon as you have a rough idea where that maintenance is, then you can make some massive tweaks and really, really see how things are going to start to change for you. And that changes as well, as you well know, because, I mean, last year, my maintenance was right around 2,800 calories. Like, as soon as I hit 2,800 and below, that's when I started losing weight. Now that I'm ramping back up, I don't know what it's going to be yet, but we'll see as the time goes on. But let me back up a little bit, because this all started with me when I lost all my weight, got down to about 165 pounds. Rode that out for a while, didn't track anything, but then I wanted to attempt a cut. No idea what I was doing. I was just like, well, I know I'm eating this many calories. I'm just going to eat this many calories. It worked, but it was a miserable and was not a sustainable experience. My appetite was all over the place. Mood was all over the place. And so that's where I would definitely say buying into a program is definitely in your best interest, because it provides a little bit of guidance and structure. And so if you don't know what you're doing, that is huge. And so after I bottomed out, I decided I wanted to bulk, which is, that was an experience. So my bulking experience was 3,700 calories and 310 grams of fat a day for 6 months, and I gained a whole whopping 12 pounds. So, but what I realized, and again, that was, again, things that you gotta really take your time and really pay attention to how you feel. Because it wasn't till I was towards the end of my bulk that I realized that I had completely wrecked my satiety signals. And I was just eating to a number because I knew I had this much food on my plate that would get me to these macros. And it didn't matter if I was hungry or not, I was going to eat that much food. So the joke I would always say was like, I would eat till I was full and keep right on eating till I was finished. And so towards the end of that bulk, it kind of dawned on me that I'm like, man, I'm literally staring at my second dinner plate full of food. I'm not even hungry, but I'm just one fork at a time. One fork at a time. And I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing? like, you know, I'm 6 months into this. I've already gained weight. Why am I still doing this? So that's when I had decided to cut, and I was going to reach out to you and for the program, but I knew my calories were way high. So then I just started dropping them little by little to try to establish roughly where my maintenance was. But I mean, if you're eating almost 4,000 calories a day, as soon as you cut that number down, your weight starts to come off a little bit. So in all actuality, in the first cut, the big purpose of me doing it was to really starve myself out and reestablish my hunger signals, because they were so kind of backwards and broken at that point that I didn't know. I could like stare at food and convince myself I was hungry, and I could do it at any hour of the day, regardless of what was in front of me, regardless of what I ate before that. Which is okay if you realize it, but if you're not completely in control of what you're doing, it's not a good place to be.
Yeah, dude, I honestly, man, like I can't tell you how much I agree with you there, like that shared experience, because I think it was November of 2019, and that's weird that I even know when it happened, that I looked at a plate of food and there was like maybe still 5 or 6 ounces of meat there. And then I looked at Maura and I was like, you know what I just realized? I don't have to eat this. Like, I'm full. And it's weird, but it was like eureka. You know, like I was like, I cannot believe that, you know, and because I went through that in college, bro. Like I was just like eat. And that's why, like, I think if any problem, if you're going to have any problem, I think it's better to have this problem that we had as a dude. Because most people want to put on muscle and, you know, they really just don't understand the amount of discomfort that it takes. I always tell people, if you don't know what it takes, watch Den of Giants. It's by Vice, which I'm not a fan of Vice, but it's a freaking awesome, like 21-minute video about the strongmen in, is it Norway? I believe it's in Norway. And it talks like all of them, they're basically talking about what it's like to be a strongman. And they said the hardest thing to do is the eating, you know, because these guys are eating anywhere from 10 to 13,000 calories a day and much more for the really big ones. But like, you know, the guys that are like 300, you know, 300 to 320, they're eating probably anywhere from 10 to 15,000 calories a day. And it's a freaking job. And you're right. You blow right by satiety. And then you really have to learn how to teach yourself, like, am I hungry? Sometimes you got to start by going on a schedule just at first, and then, practice mindful eating. So I'm so happy you said that, man. And so here we are now. Your baseline has gotten higher. You're probably, I would guess, you're probably going to end up around three grand after this one.
Yeah, it's looking that way. I mean, I think right now I'm almost done with the reverse, so I think I'm back up to like right around 2,500 calories, right around there. And then, you know, the first jump when you're cutting down is the big jump. So I'm just going to kind of ride that out. And the difference between last year and this year has been insane. Like this year, and I used almost the exact same macros because I ended up eating right around the same level right before I started the cut. But like I do recall last year coming off that bulk, like it was absolute misery from start to finish. And those last couple weeks, I mean, it was just bad. But and it's probably a combination of, one, my body's used to it. Two, I was definitely more mentally prepared. And I started from a way leaner starting point, even though my weight was the same. So this year, I got down to 21. I could have rode that 2,100 calories out for probably another couple weeks and been comfortable. Like, I had zero hunger issues, zero sleep issues, like zero intensity issues. It was only towards the end of the third week that I did realize that that my intensity at the gym and my training performance was starting to dip a little bit. But at that point, I'm like, well, I've only got 4 more days before I start to reverse, so it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, I'm gonna just add in a little personal tidbit for people on refeeds, because I wrote this for a presentation that I did that Chris was on last night for a group of men that he's with my buddy Frank, and I thought of you when I wrote this, and I was talking about refeeds, and I said, I was talking about cutting on carnivore, and this can go for keto or other things too, but I thought to myself, okay, if you are between around, let's say 10 to 12% body fat, you can do a refeed, and you're cutting, you can do a refeed. I was giving prompts. So you can do a refeed every time you go to church. So that should be every week. We should be going to church every week. If you're anywhere between 15 and 20%, I think that's what it was. Yeah, 15 and 20%, you can do a refeed while cutting every time you get a paycheck. So every 2 weeks. And if you're between 20 and 25% and you're cutting, then, it's iffy. But if you do, you can only do it every time you pay your rent or your mortgage. So once a month. So for anybody who, especially if you are at a really healthy caloric baseline, and you realize that you look at a program like mine that's pretty darn aggressive, and you see that the calories are low, think of those guidelines when you're doing a refeed, and that's really going to help, because it's basic calorie shifting. Whenever you want to do a long-term cutting approach, you want to make sure that your ghrelin stays in check. You don't want it to go out of control, and that's your hunger hormone. It's one of the two ways, several ways, but it's one of the two main ways that your body tries to adjust to these crazy deficits. The other way is, of course, it downregulates your metabolism. So adding in these regular refeeds is really going to help you with that long-term approach that Berto's been talking about. All right, brother, let's talk about grilling and smoking. So what's your favorite cut to grill? What's your favorite cut to smoke? And what are some best practices for each?
Grilling is always going to be steaks. And just particular to my region, like the local butcher shop I got up the street, they just have killer top sirloins, and I love their top sirloins. If I go out to eat, I don't choose top sirloin, I choose a ribeye. But if I'm at that butcher shop, they have these massive top sirloins. They're like $4 a pound, and they're just amazing. So like when it comes to grilling, I've got that and the cast iron, either the griddle or just on the grill. I got that process down, and for me, like the bang for your buck, it's not incredibly expensive. Takes like 8 minutes to cook, and you end up with a delicious steak. You really can't go wrong.
Yeah, dude, sirloin is one of those that I feel the same way. I don't go out of my way for it, but like if the ones you're getting from your butcher shop are anything like Cooper's, like I've been talking about Cooper's sirloin over there in Austin. It's like they're tender. They must do some sort of brining or something, because it's a big, thick sirloin, and when you when you touch it, it's like soft. You know how like a ribeye would be.
Yeah, these are like almost like you can almost cut them with a fork. It's insane. And when it comes to smoking, like brisket's always king. It just brisket's a little more finicky than like say pork shoulder if you're gonna do pulled pork. And in my opinion,
that's an easy one compared to brisket, dude.
Yeah. Pulled pork is a lot more versatile with leftovers. It reheats better. So I'd probably do pulled pork more often than I do brisket. But man, and even with the family now, between me and my wife, who now is no longer a vegetarian, the 3 kids, like I'll cook like a 17-pound brisket between Saturday and Sunday, let it take its time to smoke. So by the time you're done cooking, you end up with 14, 15 pounds of meat, and that'll be done on Sunday, and we're lucky if that makes it till Thursday. Like between everyone in the family, they just destroy that brisket. And same thing, like, yeah, is the price of brisket expensive? Yes. Once you buy an entire brisket, it is expensive. But if you break it down to how many meals you're getting out of it and how many people it's feeding, it's definitely in your best interest to just put a big old slab on the smoker and let it ride.
Yeah, man. So like for me with brisket, for anybody who's because I know there's lots of what's the word, brisket scared people, which I totally understand, because the first brisket I ever did was terrible.
The first one's always hard.
Like brisket it's like a rite of passage. You got to learn how to smoke a brisket. But like for me, what I'll do is I'll put it like on super smoke, so like real low 225. And usually I'll put it in like depending on the size. If it's like anywhere between 12 and 14 pounds, it usually is. I'll put it in like anywhere from 8 to 10 at night. At that point, I don't have it wrapped or anything. I just, covered in mustard, covered in that rub, and then super smoke. And then by the time it's like 6 or 7 a.m., I go check it, and it's usually right around 165 internal temp. That's when I go ahead and wrap it. I increase the temperature to 275, and then again, depending on the size, anywhere from 4 or 5 more hours. Once that internal temp hits anywhere between 197 and 200 for me, that's when I take it out, let it rest for 20, 30 minutes, whatever, and then slice against the grain. But have you pulled brisket, or you usually just slice it as well?
No, with the brisket, I usually just slice them.
Yeah.
It's either sliced or I just end up if I get lazy and don't feel like slicing, I'll just chop the whole thing, mix it up, and we'll just eat just chopped brisket.
Chop. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, but I mean, same concept. The overnight ones are good. And for me, it depends on the cut, because like sometimes like I'll go to the grocery store and it won't be like it's not a prime grade, like it'll be choice or select, but it's like $2 a pound.
Yeah.
And if I find it for cheap, I've gone hot and fast at 300 degrees wrapped in foil after a while, and you can make a lower grade of brisket taste way better than it really is doing the hot and fast method. And my hot and fast method is the preparation is the same. You put it on the smoker at 300 and just let it ride at 300 till it gets to about 170 internal. Once it gets to 170 internal, I wrap it real tight in foil with a cup of beef bone broth, or pretty much any broth for that matter. Any broth will work. Put a cup or two of broth in there, wrap it up real tight, and just let it ride till it hits temp. And then it's basting in its own juices and boiling and steaming, and the foil's keeping it all in. And once you can jab a meat probe in there and it's nice and tender, crack it open and let it breathe for like 20-30 minutes, and then that bark will actually resettle. And then I'll wrap it back up in foil, and I'll throw it in a cooler, and I'll let it sit in a cooler for like 2-3 hours. And then pull it out and cut it. And then, once you put it on the cutting board, it gets that beautiful jiggle everybody wants with a brisket. And you can make a tougher, cheaper cut present itself way nicer than it actually started off as. And I've had a lot of luck with that lately. And not only that, I've had like a 15-pound brisket where I've had it from putting it on the smoker to cutting it in 8 hours.
Wow, dude, that's skill, man. I find those cheaper cuts a lot of the time they have way more fat, so I think that helps. They're like weird cuts that like have like massive fat caps, or not fat caps, but like chunks of fat on them. So totally agree there, dude. Well, listen, tell us about everything you're doing with respect to podcasts, where people can find you online and all that stuff.
Yeah, we do have a podcast, a little sporadic now. We're getting back into it. Is the Keto Man's Club podcast, based off the Facebook group, which is the Keto Man's Club, which is obviously just for men, which makes it kind of nice. We do that. The easiest place to find me is Instagram, l.ketocholo, which is a name that started off as a joke and now it just stuck, so there's no reason to change it.
Yeah, bro. I'm waiting for the t-shirts, man. I'm waiting for the Keto Cholo t-shirts.
I've got to come up with something. And then in more recent news, I will actually be starting the 1st of October, which is probably going to be after this comes out, is I'll be joining Jonathan Shane's team with the Keto Road on the KetoRoad.com.
Awesome, dude.
And,
yeah.
I'll be coaching through him, and we're gonna give that a go. And that for me, quick little side stories. Like I've always done side work. It's always painting cars. Little extra play money on the side. And as we discussed before, it's not exactly the healthiest way to make a living. So it's like, I still want to have the ability to have a little extra income on the side, but I'm trying to pull myself away from having to leave the house and go to a body shop and gear up from head to toe and actually paint cars for that. So it's been conversations have been going on for a while, and it was just times where like, man, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep having to go out and grind between the lifting and the Jiu Jitsu. I still work a full-time job, and I got a family, and doing most of the cooking and all that stuff. It's like, it came down to like, well, if I can consult people from my house, as opposed to having to leave every weekend and go to a shop to do my thing there, like it's definitely an option worth exploring. So I talked to Jonathan Shane about it, and he signed me onto his team, and we'll be starting that here in a couple weeks.
Dude, I love that, guys. Check him out. Gormy, we're gonna have Gormy on the Low Carb Hustle podcast soon. I was just talking with Adam and Robert about that yesterday. great team. Jonathan is a great spiritual confidant of mine. The last year we've been really just fellowshipping with each other and talking about all the kingdom things that we're really getting involved with on that end, dude. But I just want to thank you, man. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing this, brothers, sharing your wisdom. I'm happy for you. I'm happy for what you got coming. And, wish you the best, Can't wait to freaking see you again.
Yeah, it'll be great. Thanks for having me on, man.